Hi, this is Haley, and I'm going to be painting a butterfly using a stencil to make it look like a hand-painted watercolor card. Okay, what I'm using today is Canson's watercolor paper, XL cold press, and it's the 9 by 12 inches, and I cut down my paper to 4 and 5 1/4 because the base that I'm going to be using will be 4 1/4 to 5 1/2, so there'll be a little bit of a border. So I'm going to be painting on this, and then the stencils I'm using I think are from Dover brand, and it's usually like cheap at craft stores. Maybe you can find it at Hobby Lobby or somewhere. And there's usually, I think there's maybe 6 butterfly stencils, and it's kind of on this like plasticky paper, and it's I think like $1 for the whole book or $2, so it's really cheap. But I'm going to be using this one today, and I'm going to trace it with a pencil, just a regular pencil, and I have a sanding eraser, and the other supplies I'm using is paintbrushes. And I'm not sure what size I'm going to use yet, but I have a 4 and an 8 and another 8 and a 10, and they're from Silver Black Velvet and Master Touch and Princeton. And then I'll be painting with Ken Oliver's Color Bursts, and I think the colors that I'll be using will be the orange and the gambog, and then maybe a lime green up at the top of the card. And then when it's time to assemble the card all together, then I'll tell you about the stamps. So this is an example of what we're going to be trying to do. It's not, the stencil that I'm going to use today is a different butterfly, I think, but this is kind of what it's going to look like. And the stencil is a little bit bigger than the paper that we're using, so you kind of have to make sure you're not going over the edge and put the butterfly at an angle. Just going to check to make sure it's not over the edge. So it's going to be at an angle, and then very, very lightly, I'm just going to trace the butterfly with a pencil, and try to do it very lightly because we're going to be erasing the lines and just using it as a guide to paint with. We're not going to keep the lines there. You want it to kind of try to have a look of like you painted it all on your own, which you are, but and so there you probably can faintly see it. I'm going to lightly erase a little bit because some edges like over here and over here are a little bit dark, because it is kind of hard once you paint it to erase the lines. You don't want to erase some of the paint too. I'm using a sanding eraser, which sands away a little bit of the imperfections and things. And another thing is, even though I use the stencil for these lines, I'm erasing some of them because I want to go closer. Like in the example, you can see that there's not a big line gap over here. I kind of painted more closely so it doesn't look so spread apart like a stencil would. So we're going to be painting a little bit, making the wings a little bit more over and closer together. So I'm going to lightly erase. So again, like I mentioned earlier, these are the paints that I'm going to be using, and I'm going to be using it in a palette instead of sprinkling on. There's many different ways to use color bursts. So here's the orange, the gambog, the lime green, and the lamb black. And I'm just going to be wetting them. Some of the powders are already in here, and then some I had used previously, and so I'm just going to be putting some water in and wetting it. They're really, I don't think I'm going to use this color, but they're very bright, vibrant, and you can mix and make your own colors. I do have a jar of water nearby to clean my paintbrushes to change from colors. I'm going to start with the orange, and I'm using a number, we'll see how it goes, a number 8 brush. And I'm just following along that line. And you want to make some jagged marks. And kind of paint loosely like this. Just, you can have some pockets of white, which kind of makes it look like the spots on a butterfly. And if you have it wet, which this type of brush is pretty wet, you can drop in some of the yellow. Now I'm going to start on the bottom. I'm going to make it come up a little bit higher so that it doesn't look so much like you're using a stencil and making the wings closer together. And it's I made a little mistake here of dropping some of the paint too close. These colors are pretty vibrant. If you can't pick it up, it's okay. You can splatter paint. Sometimes I splatter paint afterwards anyways, or try with the sanding eraser to get that off. I think we'll go on to the other wing. Sometimes I like to do the outer edge first, so you kind of know where your edges are, and then fill in the middle. Then I'm going to use the black for the body. I'm going to use a smaller brush, probably the 4. And it's very faint what I have on the pencil, but the butterfly body is kind of easy to paint. Just the wings are the hardest part. And if you want a dark black, you might have to go more over it. The body, usually I do fill it in. I don't leave any white spots. I'm going to take a 0 Princeton brush to do the antennas. Okay, now we'll just wait for it to dry. Okay, I'm gonna just go with my eraser first, which you probably can't see too good on the camera, some faint lines, but I'm gonna do that first and erase some of the little lines that I see, pencil marks where I was gonna maybe put the antenna, and a little paint splatter. And then I'm going to, I think it needs a little something, so I'm going to use the black paint and try to make a few little splatters here and there. You don't want to do too much of a big splatter because then it's going to reactivate or run into your painting of the butterfly, which we don't really want to smear that. But even some of these outer lines where there were lines, the darker paint, this orange and stuff that we outlined the wings with, covered up some of the pencil marks, so it did pretty good. Okay, so now I'm just loading my brush and hopefully just make some small splatter marks. And we're gonna let this dry, and then we'll put a little sediment down here. I'm going to be using a sentiment from Sentimental Birthdays from Winnie and Walter stamp set, and I'm going to be, there's many great birthday sentiments. I'm going to use the one that says Make a Wish. It will say Make a Wish on the outside, and then the card base I'm using is, like I said earlier, I think a black 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And then the watercolor paper we have is 4 5 1/4. And inside I have stamped, "May all your wishes come true, happy birthday," with the same stamp set. So now I'm just using a stamp positioning tool. Mine is the Stamp Perfect from Hampton Arts. And I'm just gonna line this up with that number 2 and put down my magnets. And then I'm just going to check the door to make sure. Here I put the sentiment already, Make a Wish, and just check that's where I want it. And then I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. It's my favorite black ink to stamp with. So this is how it looks with the sentiment stamped on. It came out great. So now we're just going to use some tape to put the card base on. With watercolor paper, since it is textured, you kind of need a lot of adhesive, glue, tape, whatever you're going to be using. This one, even though I got the butterfly pretty wet, it didn't warp too much. And then I'm just going to adhere it to the base and try to leave a little bit of that black edge showing before I put it down, which can be a little tricky. Make sure you get all the edges down. There, I'm really happy how it turned out. Thanks for watching. Here are some other panels I've done in the past.